Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. This will be a very simple recipe. I'm starting by cutting half a large onion. You can also use one small one or medium sized. I'm going to use 2 garlic cloves. I will just mince them, chop them as tiny as I can. I will set this aside and then we can continue. I have my pan and a pot with water side to side. The pan is on a 6 out of 9. The pot is on a 9 out of 9. While I'm waiting for the water to boil, I'm going to start browning the meat. I didn't add any oil because the meat itself has some fat and you will notice that immediately comes to the pan. That will be enough. Now that the meat seems to be halfway there, I'm going to add the garlic and the onion. Now we have to mix them. We want to make sure that they cook evenly, so I'm going to try my best to make sure everything gets mixed together nicely. This is a good moment for adding our seasoning. In this case, I'm just going to stick with black pepper and salt. Even though this is called Mexican oven pasta, this is actually a Finnish recipe, so we're not going to go crazy with the seasoning. We're adding the basic salt and pepper, and we're going to add some other stuff that will give the flavor. Once the meat is almost ready, I'm going to add a can of crushed tomatoes. This is a 400 grams can. Next thing I will add is 2 deciliters of food cream. As you can tell by the swan, this is made in Finland. This is a paprika and chili flavor. If you cannot find these where you live, I'm sure you can find some Tex-Mex cream, or you can create your own by adding some normal cream and then just adding some paprika powder, some chili powder, maybe some garlic powder, and whatever other spices you would prefer. Then I'm adding 1.5 deciliters or 150 milliliters of milk. I'm just going to add them into the cream, and then I'm going to shake it just to get all of that left over. Since this container has a cap, I'm going to close it, give it a shake, and throw it in. Once I have added all these ingredients, I'm going to give it a nice stir. I want to make sure all the ingredients come together nicely. I will also turn my stove down to a 2 out of 9. I want to keep it on a low fire. I don't want this to cool down. I want it to have a very light simmer, but I don't want it to overcook or to dry up. This is also a really good time to taste and adjust the salt if needed. By now, my water is almost boiling, and at this point I'm going to add some salt. We want to have a very salty water when we are cooking pasta. Once the water is boiling, I'm going to add my pasta. I'm going to give it a stir, and I'm going to leave it there for as long as needed. How long we leave the pasta here depends on the kind of pasta. In this case, the package said 9 minutes, but because we're still throwing it into the oven, I'm going to give it only 7. Once the pasta is ready, I'm going to strain it. Just give it a minute to drip the excess water. And in some cases, you might want to save the pasta water for the sauce or some other thing. In this case, we're not going to use it, so don't worry about it. Once our pasta and meat are ready, we have to butter the casserole. If you have normal butter, you can just butter it the normal way. In this case, I'm using a spray, which is just way easier to use. Whatever you prefer to use, the reason is the same. We don't want the pasta to stick to our dish. One way to do this is adding everything to the casserole and mixing it. The way I prefer to do it is just adding a bit of pasta, then some of the meat, and then some cheese, and just repeat the process, kind of like when you are making a lasagna. The reason for me is that I like to control how nicely the meat is distributed, so I don't want to end up with all the pasta on one side or all the meat on the bottom. How you do this is of course completely up to you. What I will do is add some pasta, then I will add some of my meat, then I will add some cheese and just repeat the process. In this case, I did the same process 3 times. The kind of cheese I'm using is a Tex-Mex flavored one because it goes nicely with the paprika and all these kind of flavors we're using. If you cannot find this cheese wherever you live, I would go for maybe some plain mozzarella or even something more strong like a cheddar. Again, I think this recipe is so flexible, you can just play with it and make it your own. Once we have done all the layers, I'm going to add the rest of the sauce. If you are someone like me who is not really used to making these kind of casseroles, at this point you might be thinking this is maybe a bit too much liquid. First time I did this kind of thing, it was a bit off for me as well, but since we're throwing this into the oven, a lot of this liquid will be absorbed or will evaporate, so don't worry about it. The last layer will be of course some cheese. We want this to melt quite nicely in the oven. This is how my casserole looks before I throw it in, and now let's take it to the oven. My oven is preheated to 200 Celsius, that's about 392 Fahrenheit. I will leave my pasta there for 15 to 18 minutes. Times might vary a bit between oven to oven, but just keep in mind everything is cooked. So we just want to melt the cheese nicely. We want to get a nice golden brown color without burning it. As you can see, this is a really nice looking casserole. It's very basic: meat, pasta, some cheese. You can really not go wrong with this. Once that I serve my pasta, I'm going to top it with some fresh avocado. This is something you will find in a lot of Mexican dishes. It brings some creaminess, it also brings the freshness, the contrast with the heat of the pasta and the freshness of the avocado, and it's just a really nice way to finish this dish. This is how I make this Mexican oven pasta. Of course, there's not a lot of Mexican going on in here. This is a recipe I found in a magazine or in one of those like advertisement things. It's, of course, they're advertising their products, the Tex-Mex cream or maybe the Tex-Mex cheese or whatever. It's one of those recipes that is for the everyday life, very quick, very simple. Made it maybe 15-20 minutes on the kitchen, and then you make, I don't know, throw it in the oven and you can feed quite a lot of people, or you can have these for the rest of the week, just make a few boxes as a meal prep. I don't know, this is very simple, everyday life, still quite good. I was surprised by how nice it is. It's very creamy, the avocado just gives a bit of the freshness, and I don't know, very simple. I hope you like it. And this is a very common thing here in Finland, making these casseroles. Throw it in the oven, very simple, easy cooking. I've been asked a few times, what's the original version of this Mexican casserole or Mexican pasta things, and we don't have this. At least in Mexico, in my city, it's not very common to cook things on the oven. Of course, like of all breads and these kind of things on Christmas, but most Mexican homes I know have a lot of pots on the oven, so it's not something you use every day, not as much as here in Finland, I think. This was a nice experiment, nice little thing. Anyway, I hope you liked it. I hope you try it at home, press like, activate the bell, subscribe, all those kind of things, and see you in the next one.